A snowed-in miracle. "Attention passengers," crackled the overhead speaker at Everpine Junction, a quaint but aging train station nestled between snow-laden fir forests. "Due to severe weather conditions, all trains are delayed until further notice." The announcement echoed in the small waiting room, where a patchwork of travelers had gathered, their plans thrown into chaos by the Christmas Eve blizzard. Through the frosted windows, the storm raged, draping the landscape in an endless sheet of white. The room's occupants were as varied as the scattered luggage they leaned on. Walter, a retired mechanic with a grizzled beard and a toolbox in tow, sat hunched over, grumbling about the storm. Across from him was Iris, a young artist, her sketchpad balanced precariously on her lap as she attempted to capture the scene. Ryan, a tech-savvy college student, typed furiously on his laptop, while Mrs. Green, a kindly grandmother, fussed over a tin of cookies she had baked for her grandchildren. Lastly, there was Nina, a single mother with her bright-eyed son, Elliot, who clutched a toy train and gazed out the window at the snow. "I don't think we're getting home tonight," Ryan muttered. Mrs. Green patted his arm. "Then we make the best of it, dear. It's still Christmas Eve." The initial atmosphere was tense. Walter snapped at Ryan for hogging the outlet with his laptop charger. Iris spilled her coffee while sketching, muttering apologies as Walter grumbled about messy kids. Nina, overwhelmed by Elliot's boundless energy, tried to calm him as he ran circles around the room. It was Mrs. Green who broke the ice. "Who wants cookies?" she called, holding up her tin. Elliot's face lit up as he dashed over, and soon the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg filled the room. Iris offered to draw portraits of the group, her charcoal pencil bringing smiles as she captured their likenesses. Ryan set up his laptop to play Christmas carols, and even Walter cracked a smile when Elliot handed him a cookie and asked, "Were you Santa when you were younger?" Walter chuckled. "Not quite, kid, but I've fixed my fair share of chimneys." As the hours passed, small connections formed. Iris sketched Walter repairing a car, adding humor with a cartoonish Santa hat. Mrs. Green taught Elliot how to fold paper stars, while Nina shared stories of her own childhood Christmases. Ryan, fiddling with his phone, suggested a trivia game that had everyone laughing. The storm outside howled like an untamed beast, shaking the old train station windows. Inside, the mismatched group huddled together, their laughter and camaraderie gradually warming the space. Mrs. Green's sharp eyes landed on something in the corner, a dusty, forlorn Christmas tree, its branches bent and bare. "Well, would you look at that?" she said, rising to her feet. "We can't let Christmas Eve pass without a proper tree." Elliot gasped, his face lighting up. "A Christmas tree? Really? Can we decorate it?" Walter scoffed, crossing his arms. "With what? We don't exactly have ornaments lying around." "Leave that to us," Iris said with a determined smile. She rummaged through her sketchbook and bag, pulling out colored pencils and scraps of paper. "I'll make some ornaments." "I'll help," Elliot shouted, bouncing on his toes. Mrs. Green chimed in. "I've got this scarf we can use as a tree skirt. It's old, but it'll do the trick." Nina, inspired by the energy, opened her purse and pulled out a small bag of popcorn. "We can string these into garlands. Ryan, do you have anything we can use to thread them?" "Dental floss," Ryan replied with a grin, fishing through his travel kit. "I knew it'd come in handy someday." Walter, ever the pragmatist, dug into his toolbox and pulled out pliers, wire, and a roll of foil. "I'll make a star," he muttered, shaking his head. "This has to be the strangest project I've worked on in years." The group sprang into action. Iris sketched quick designs on scraps of paper, turning them into colorful snowflakes, stars, and candy canes. Elliot helped cut them out, his small hands snipping eagerly at the edges. Mrs. Green expertly draped her scarf around the tree's base, smoothing it out like she was decorating a grand hall. "Perfect," she said with a satisfied nod. Nina and Ryan sat cross-legged on the floor, stringing popcorn garlands with surprising precision. "This is harder than it looks," Nina said, laughing as a kernel crumbled in her hands. "Tell me about it," Ryan replied, threading another piece carefully. "But hey, at least it smells like Christmas now." Meanwhile, Walter sat at a nearby bench, shaping wire and foil with the focus of a craftsman. Iris glanced over and raised an eyebrow. "Walter, are you smiling?" "Don't push it," he grumbled, though a small smirk betrayed him. "I just like a good project." As they worked, the room filled with a sense of purpose. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the hum of collaboration drowned out the wind. Finally, the tree was ready. Mrs. Green stepped back, admiring their handiwork. The branches were adorned with paper ornaments, popcorn garlands, and Walter's foil star, which gleamed under the faint light. Ryan set up his laptop, using a string of fairy lights from his travel gear to illuminate the tree. When he plugged it in, the lights flickered to life, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. The group stood in silence for a moment, their breath catching as they took it all in. "It's beautiful," Nina whispered, her eyes shining. "It's not perfect," Walter said, his gruff tone softening. "But it's ours." Elliot clapped his hands, jumping up and down. "It's the best Christmas tree ever." "Absolutely," Iris agreed, snapping a quick sketch of the tree with her charcoal pencil. "We made something special." Mrs. Green folded her hands. "This tree is more than just decorations. It's a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, we can find joy and warmth." "Cheers to that," Ryan said, raising his thermos of coffee. As they stood around the glowing tree, the storm outside seemed to lose its edge. The room felt brighter, warmer, a true haven against the cold world outside. The soft glow of the Christmas tree bathed the room in warmth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The group gathered around the tree, their faces reflecting a mix of contentment and wonder at what they had created together. The storm outside continued to whistle faintly, but inside, the sound was muted by laughter and the crackle of shared joy. Elliot, clutching one of Mrs. Green's paper stars, piped up, "This is just like being in one of those Christmas movies, right, Mom?" Nina smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Maybe even better, sweetheart." She looked at the others. "I think we've earned a moment to share a little about ourselves. After all, it's not every day you spend Christmas Eve with strangers who feel like friends." Walter grunted. "Strangers, huh? You're not getting rid of me that easily." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze softening as he began to speak. "One Christmas, years ago, I spent the day fixing toys for a charity drive. I was just starting out as a repairman, barely scraping by, but it felt good, like I was part of something bigger. Haven't done anything like it since, though." He hesitated, then added, "Maybe I should." Iris leaned forward, her sketch pad resting on her knees. "That's incredible, Walter. For me, Christmas was always quiet. I'd sit by the window with my sketch pad and draw the world outside, but I never thought my art meant much. Then one year, I started leaving sketches for my neighbors, little pieces of their lives I'd drawn. I found out later that one of those sketches helped someone through a really rough time. That's when I realized art could connect people. Ryan cleared his throat, his face tinged with embarrassment. Guess it's my turn. I haven't gone home for Christmas in 3 years. Kept telling my family I was too busy, but the truth is, I didn't want them to know I've been struggling, failing really, at school. But tonight, he paused, glancing at the glowing tree. This makes me think maybe I've been looking at things all wrong. Sometimes you just have to show up. Mrs. Green nodded knowingly. Family doesn't care about the failures, dear. They care about you. That's what Christmas is all about. She smiled, her eyes misty as she began her story. I've been blessed with 5 grandchildren, and every year we bake cookies together. It's messy, chaotic, and perfect. This year, I couldn't be with them because of the storm. But here with all of you, sharing my cookies, it's a little like being home. Nina, her voice soft, spoke next. I'll never forget my first Christmas as a mom. I was overwhelmed, tired, and scared I wasn't doing enough. But Elliot here, she ruffled her son's hair, just smiled at me with those big eyes, and suddenly it all felt right. That's the magic of Christmas, isn't it? It's not about the presents. It's about finding joy, even in the chaos. Elliot grinned. And cookies. Don't forget cookies. The room erupted in laughter, the tension of the earlier hours long forgotten. As the clock crept closer to midnight, someone suggested exchanging small gifts. I have something, Iris said, flipping through her sketchbook. She handed each person a quick sketch she'd made that evening. Walter tinkering with his tools, Ryan setting up the fairy lights, Mrs. Green with her cookie tin, Nina and Elliot stringing popcorn, and even the glowing tree. It's not much, but it's a memory. Walter chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Guess I should have brought my workshop with me, huh? Here, kid. He handed Elliot a small flashlight from his toolbox. You'll need this if you're going to be Santa's helper. Elliot's eyes widened. This is cooler than Santa's sleigh. Mrs. Green, not to be outdone, divided her remaining cookies into small bundles, tied with scraps of ribbon she had in her bag. You can't leave empty-handed, she said, her tone firm but warm. Ryan, ever the tech wizard, grinned mischievously. Hold on, I've got one more thing. He positioned his laptop on a chair and used its camera to take a group photo. The result wasn't perfect. Walter's face was half in shadow, and Elliot had jumped mid-shot, but it captured the heart of the moment. As the photo flashed on the screen, Mrs. Green laughed. That's one for the scrapbooks. The room fell into a comfortable silence as they admired their handiwork. The glowing tree, the scattered sketches, and the makeshift feast of cookies and coffee. Outside, the storm began to quiet, as if even the weather wanted to savor the peace inside. As dawn broke, the storm had calmed, leaving behind a sparkling blanket of snow that glistened under the first light of Christmas morning. A distant whistle pierced the silence, signaling that the trains were finally back on schedule. The waiting room buzzed with a mix of excitement and bittersweet farewells. Walter turned to Ryan, offering a firm handshake. Merry Christmas, kid. Take care of yourself, and don't forget to unplug from time to time, he said with a rare smile that softened his usually gruff demeanor. Merry Christmas, Walter, Ryan replied, his voice touched with gratitude. Iris carefully tore a sketch from her notebook, a quick drawing of the decorated Christmas tree they'd built together. She handed it to Mrs. Green, who held it close to her heart. This will always remind me of this special night, Mrs. Green said. Then, with a warm smile, she added, Merry Christmas, dear. Nina bundled up Elliot, who gave each person an enthusiastic hug. Merry Christmas, he exclaimed, his joy infectious. When he reached Walter, he grinned and waved the flashlight. Santa's coolest helper ever! As the train arrived, the group exchanged hugs and heartfelt wishes. "Merry Christmas, everyone," Nina said, her voice warm. "You've made this night unforgettable." "Here's to more memories like this," Iris added with a smile as she boarded the train. The platform grew quieter as the train began to move, carrying its passengers away. Through the frosty window, they waved one last time, their smiles bright against the wintry backdrop. That stormy night, once marked by uncertainty, had transformed into something magical, a Christmas morning filled with connection, warmth, and memories they would cherish forever. Months later, the group remained as close as the bonds forged that snowy Christmas Eve. Nina sent photos of Elliot holding his toy train, now equipped with Walter's flashlight, his grin as wide as the tracks it rolled on. Iris mailed Walter a watercolor painting of the Christmas tree they had decorated, the makeshift ornaments glowing with warmth. Walter placed it in his workshop, a reminder of the night that had softened his heart. Mrs. Green received a framed sketch of herself, drawn by Iris, which she hung proudly above her kitchen counter. It became a conversation piece for anyone who visited, paired with her story of the unexpected Christmas miracle. Ryan, inspired by the group's warmth, turned his tech skills toward creating a virtual meeting space where they could reconnect. On the first anniversary of their snowed-in miracle, they gathered online, sharing stories and laughter as if no time had passed. Each year, they exchanged small gifts, letters, and a shared wish to one day meet again in person. Some bonds, forged in the unlikeliest of places, are simply meant to last a lifetime, and theirs was one of them.